Hi, I'm Krutika, and today's conversation is with Diren. When we think about the modern man, we envision somebody embodying confidence and charm. And whilst beauty standards are often thrust upon women, let's not forget that men face it too, maybe just not as overtly. In this conversation, we unpack Diren's journey with accepting appearances. Having battled topical steroid withdrawal over several years, he candidly reveals the struggles and the hard work it took to confront his inner demons. From challenges with dating and intimacy to breaking up with his ex and recognizing that he has to learn to love himself before he can be open to others. This conversation is a reminder that often the answers we seek can be found deep within us. We simply have to have the patience to look. Hello, Diren. So lovely to have you on my podcast today. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks, Ritika. Thank you for having me. It means a lot. I'm very excited.
Me too. I'm excited as well. Is this the first time you're doing a podcast, Diren?
Yes, yeah, it is. I've never actually, this is a whole new experience for me. So it might just be a whole new journey as well. Let's see.
Fantastic. Now, we're in the midst of a bank holiday weekend, actually. Have you been up to anything exciting?
So I've actually spent a lot of this weekend. I've just spent with family, to be honest. So nothing out of the ordinary, but it's been really nice. I'm quite a homely person anyway. So what about yourself?
Yeah, a fairly chilled one like yourself, to be honest. And we actually were on holiday just a few weeks ago to Abu Dhabi. So for us, the bank holiday this time round, we didn't really plan too much. Just went out for a lunch with the family on Saturday. And much like yourself, have just been chilling and spending time with the family. But we'll launch into our conversation today, which is about your journey being a man and dealing with a skin-related issue. And I
Yes.
know skin and skin-related issues can be quite debilitating, so we will do a
Mm,
bit of a deep dive into your journey with that. But I want to start from the very top. I want you to summarize for us what your journey with your skin has been like. And I know you've struggled with TSW, which some of our listeners may not be familiar with. So could you tell us what this is and how has it all started and unfolded for you?
yeah, sure. It's a hard one to recall, to be honest, when it comes to how the journey started. But I think if I can recall, it was around 2010, 2011. So I was around 15, 16 at the time. And obviously, being a guy, I was pretty lucky enough to even have facial hair in the first place to be able to start shaving, because that's essentially how it all started. Was I cut my cheek when I was shaving, and literally within 30 minutes, I just had a really intense irritation. So really red face, really bumpy. And I just knew, yes, something wasn't right. Something didn't feel right there. And it was only until I woke up the next day that I pretty much realized, okay, something definitely isn't right, because my face was covered in pustules and I just had a
Oh dear.
very yellow crust all over my face. And I just thought, okay, I need to get this checked out. Um, yeah, so I saw a doctor, spoke to them, and they just said, yeah, you got an infection. So here's some antibiotics to deal with the infection, and here's some topical steroid creams to deal with the inflammation on your face. So no problems. Within 2 weeks, absolutely fine. I was back to normal. It seemed like just clearly a an accident, should we say? And then only until around 10 months later, it happened again. Saw the doctor, same treatment, antibiotics, steroid creams. 6 months later, happened again. And that cycle just kept happening. And it was only sort of, I think, within the 6 month mark, where every 6 months I'd have this problem. And it just basically got worse and worse to the point where every 2 days I was basically applying steroid creams. And if I stopped applying those steroid creams, my skin just became like red raw, infections, yellow crust. It was it was just insane. There was some level of dependency on these steroid creams, and I couldn't quite really pinpoint at the time what it was. So I guess for your listeners, for those that probably don't know, TSW is basically topical steroid withdrawal. So it's a skin condition where, like a drug addict is addicted to heroin, my body became addicted to steroid creams or topical steroid creams. And the insane thing is this, like what I didn't realize at the time was just how quick this could actually happen. Like, I mean, topical steroid creams, like what they can do to not only the immune system, but to your skin barrier in just 2 weeks, because that's usually the course that you're prescribed, is just insane. So I didn't know at the time, but it the steroid creams now, which has only just been investigated on a medical level, can essentially stop your mitochondria in your body from actually working. Obviously, the mitochondria being responsible for how we produce energy, which essentially fuels our body. It essentially completely warps that to the point where, like, some of the symptoms I was having, my skin was essentially falling off in terms of huge flakes, red raw skin. I mean, my skin was so thin because of the damage the steroid creams have done that protein was coming out of my skin. That's what the yellow crust was, which at the time I didn't quite realize. But, for those that don't know, that's immensely critical if it's not managed properly. So it was just that journey was just a really intense time, and it's not fully recognized medically. So it's very hard to get the information you need on the course to take, the action to take. It's really scary.
Thank you so much for candidly sharing that. I mean, I have spoken to another guest with a female perspective on this condition, and there are just a few things I want to unpack there. The awareness of this condition isn't something I was aware of before. So yes. I do apologize in advance for some of the questions that I might ask you here. But my understanding was that with TSW, it almost starts with an underlying skin condition. So your underlying skin condition started as you described it when you had your first shave and you had your cut, and then it transpired into something like an infection. You've not been told that you've got eczema. Is that correct?
I'm glad you said that, because I have suffered with eczema when I was younger, to be honest. So it is something I suffered with, but I've never, at the time, it wasn't eczema that caused it, should we say. So I wasn't given steroid creams to treat the eczema. Right. It was definitely caused by a skin infection, but it was really, I definitely have suffered with eczema though, growing up. Mm-hmm. And I know, for example, my father suffered with eczema growing up. If I'm being honest, when it came to TSW, it wasn't sprung on by eczema, shall we say.
Understood. It's because you constantly, as you described it, had this vicious cycle of sort of every few months getting these rashes and these breakouts. How long did that go on for before you actually realised that, hang on a minute, something isn't right here and I need to change whatever it is that you're doing?
I basically was going through that from 2011 till 2019. December 2019, so 2016, 2019, where it really escalated to the point of, I'd say, those 3 years, I'd say every 2 to 4 months I was off, basically. And it got worse in 2019, to be honest, to the point where I was completely dependent on the steroid cream, so I just couldn't stop them. But that was when the penny dropped, really. And I was like, something has to give here, that there's clearly a problem, and the common denominator happens to be steroids here. If I'm being fully honest as well, I think a lot of people that I've met who have suffered from TSW, eczema is also that is another common denominator where steroids are prescribed, because we do suffer with eczema, to be honest.
Yeah, hence my question, because I have looked on the National Eczema sort of website, and I know it's sort of been referenced there. And actually you said on TSW not sort of being recognised as a official thing. Have you been to a dermatologist for a diagnosis or to actually evaluate what's actually happening with your skin?
So I went to a doctor. They did want to book me an appointment with a dermatologist, but I think with my journey, it just never got round to happening. And I don't know, I think in part that's due to just how, and this is probably the case for many people, it just escalates so quickly. And for me, I was housebound, so I physically couldn't move at the point when it got to its worst. And I just decided steroids are the problem. I have to go cold turkey. But I know, having conversations with doctors, it was very hard. I understand the position doctors are in, given how much pressure's on the NHS, turnaround times, appointment times, how much time you get in an allotted appointment. It was really hard, though, to get them to understand, listen, steroids, there is a link here between my skin and the steroids that are being prescribed, considering I've gone from a very weak potency steroid to an incredibly high potency steroid. I'm pretty confident, after looking at pictures, my skin was also bleached from the steroids. So my skin got somewhat paler as well over the years, because I'm quite a fair-skinned individual. It was really hard to get that understanding from a doctor. So I had to be very specific in how I spoke to them, and what I said, to get them to support me in what I was going through. Because, to be honest, I didn't really get any support. It was just a case of they just went along because I was so consistent and adamant in, listen, this is what it is.
You were so young. You described sort of being 15, 16 years old, and from the
Yeah,
period of 2011 to 2019 to have to deal with something like this, which is something on the largest organ of your body, visible for everyone to see. I guess what I want to ask you is, at what point did it go from just being something physical that was obviously affecting your appearance, but then also affecting you emotionally and mentally? Because I can only imagine that during those very early formative years, your appearance is one of the things you care about so much, right?
definitely. I think the first point I think for me was when the gap shortened to a few months between infections. So that's when it sort of started to hit me in both emotionally and mentally, just purely because, I'm building an established career. I'm quite young. I'm having pretty much 1 to 2 weeks off every 1 to 2 months, and it's just becoming a real problem. These are relationships I'm trying to establish between my direct work colleagues. This is a reputation that at this point I've built over 5 years that's being seriously tested here. And considering it's not officially recognized, it's very hard to get that level of empathy that you need. Um, and I think the second point, which was definitely the real point, was when I was at my worst and I was signed off from work for about a year and a half during 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was luckily COVID, so my time off. Now, I don't mean luckily because obviously COVID wasn't a lucky time, but the convenience of COVID and lockdown happening when I was off meant, okay, I didn't miss out as much from life, should we say? But yeah, I had pretty much no sign of recovery during this time. Bearing in mind that I think most people that go through TSW, there's people that have gone through it for 4 years to up to 8 years and are still in the worst of it. So seeing that for me was just like, I'm losing pretty much all my relationships that I've built. I'm losing my career. I think I could be possibly losing my life here in the process. But I have to admit, and not to put such a pessimistic outlook, but I think a definite lesson I learned was that really that when you're at your worst, it's really apparent just how little people care about your hardships unless or
Mm.
until it really starts to affect them. And it really was hard to find genuine people that, actually cared for me.
I'm so sorry that you had to deal with that. And did you feel comfortable enough to describe what you were going through at that point with your colleagues, or did you keep it to yourself?
I never really said much. I think I spoke about some of the challenges I was having with my skin and obviously how it was affecting me mentally, just because obviously to be transparent. But I have to admit, the escalation between finding out, okay, this is the cause, and the solution is to go cold turkey, to how extreme the symptoms then of me going cold turkey impacted me. I didn't really have time between that. It was a case of it happened very soon. I was off work. And then it was only at that point when I was off, I was in a position where, okay, I need to really communicate what I'm going through here. There wasn't really a point before that where I was able to sort of, let's say, prepare. I didn't really anticipate just how extreme it would get. I just knew the only way to get through this was to go through it. And it was only when I started going through it that I had to really communicate to then my colleagues.
I know you mentioned that there's very few people that, ultimately care about your hardships. I might be
Yeah.
loosely paraphrasing what I
No,
heard
no,
you
don't worry.
say. What sort of support were your family and friends able to provide you at this period?
I think the first thing is it's really hard for people to make space for others when they struggle to make space for themselves. And also, I mean, you know what it's like with life. It never stops for anyone, to be honest with you. So whether you're ill, whether you're healthy, we just don't, it seems like there's never enough time in the day. And we've all got our own lives. That's the thing. We've all got our own experiences we're going through. We've all got our own journeys we're walking. I did get support from some friends, but I could not put that expectation on them to carry me ultimately and be there all the time because they've got their own stuff to go through. My family, and also I was in a relationship at the time. I'm no longer in that relationship, but I was with a partner, which I know we'll get on to. But those two pillars, should we say, which was obviously my family and my ex at the time, when I say pillars, there's no understating that. They were absolute pillars. So without them, I don't think we'd be having this conversation now, to be quite honest with you.
Family and your partner, your then partner at the time, being those strong pillars. Because I feel when we go through something so challenging like this, we need that solid foundation
Oh,
and that
yeah.
group of people around us that can really help. Now, I just want to circle back to something, and we will come on to talking about the relationships, but maybe a personal question. I mean, I'm just thinking as a female, and I've had skin related issues, nothing
Yeah.
near as close to what you've sort of experienced. But, having had acne growing up,
Yes.
rashes that would break out on my face, especially when I was stressed and anxious. I have also been prescribed steroids in the past, but never
Mm,
went through TSW because I wasn't using it for prolonged periods. Something I hated doing was looking in the mirror.
yes.
And I just want to ask you, when you were going through this period and this challenge with your skin, what was it like looking in the mirror?
That is the perfect question, I think. And I have to admit, it's the perfect question to ask me or someone going through TSW, just because the mirror is almost like our worst enemy during this period because we just don't look in it. And I think it's like a two-pronged thing where it's hard to come to terms with what we're going through and just how severe and drastic it's impacted us physically, to then how um, that's manifested internally, emotionally, to the fact where we just lose our sense of self, our sense of worth, our sense of love. I mean, in the first year, I couldn't leave my house. I just couldn't look in the mirror. I didn't recognize myself, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, yeah.
And not only that, I lost that self worth. I also didn't want to see what was happening to me physically as well. So it was like a two pronged where it was really hard to deal with what was going on physically. It was really hard to just look at myself and
Mhm.
to see myself, see who I am. I just couldn't accept.
Just another, maybe a slightly personal question, and please don't feel like you have to answer this, but as a female, when we have skin related issues, we can apply makeup. And I know that's not the solution. And I know there is, we often don't think about males wearing makeup. I know they do, and it shouldn't be a taboo thing. It shouldn't be
Mm,
anything that's, attached to any stigma. Did you
true.
have to use makeup as a way to conceal and disguise the appearance of your skin when it was at its worst?
So I think at my worst, when my skin was so bad, um, I mean, at my worst, when I was off and it really degraded, I just used bandages. So a good joke is my brother. We got Netflix and we have our Netflix profiles. And as a little joke, he changed my Netflix profile to a picture of a mummy, just because I'd always have
Oh,
bandages around my face because I couldn't apply makeup, to be honest, because my skin was just so red, raw, and open. But you know what? It was a good joke, to be honest, because it obviously, and it's a good way to look at it, because when you're
yeah,
going through something so hard, it's just those little things just liven the mood a bit.
yeah.
But it's a good point, because before my skin was at such a point when it was so bad, um, I never applied makeup. But before I understood that steroids were the problem, when I'd get, let's say, blemishes or redness on my cheeks, like acne, I'd actually apply the steroids because it had stopped the redness. So before I was going out, it was almost like the steroids were my form of makeup to cover up the, which is, it sounds really bad, doesn't it? And I think there's a level of honesty and openness I need to put out there, that maybe that's a negligence on my side as well, because that's not what steroids are intended for.
I know that steroids give that instant relief because when
Yes.
I've used them in the past as well for the various rashes I used to get when I was younger, you're right, it does calm the redness down
Yeah.
instantly.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't know if the right word that it's an anti-inflammatory. So
Yeah. It is.
that gave me a bit of relief. And
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about, when my skin was at its worst, I would often be thinking about, okay, right, what's the social event that I'm going to? What's the be like there? Is my skin going to be spotlighted? I mean, obviously you mentioned there was a period of time where you just weren't leaving your house, but did these sort of things play on your mind?
Yeah. Definitely. It became my entire identity. Literally, I think every decision I was making was influenced, or was in partly influenced or directly influenced by my skin. And that might be whether it was uncomfortable or whether how it was making me feel. But it absolutely played a part in what I was doing. And I think before it got to it being as bad, that definitely played a part in me losing some of the relationships I lost just because I couldn't make myself available, to be honest, for some events. But I think, what I mentioned about I was applying those steroid creams, let's say, to cover up some of the acne and stuff. If I'm being perfectly transparent, that was in part an insecurity in me, an emotional um, outcry that maybe needed addressing because it having acne isn't a bad thing.
A
Yep,
lot of people go through it, right?
yep, exactly. But
Yeah,
that was a lesson for me as well, going
yeah.
through the process. Yeah,
Yeah. And I love that you're sort of reflecting and thinking about the lessons, almost retrospectively identifying for
yeah.
yourself, which is brilliant because you've obviously come out of the worst of it. Now, let's talk about your relationship. You mentioned you were with a partner at the time when you were going
Mm.
through a lot of this, and she was that pillar. If you don't mind sharing, what happened there, and did dating thereafter become a bit more of a challenge?
For me, when I was in a relationship at the time, she really was my rock. I mean, before that, we had um, no issues, to be honest with you. But it was only when we started going through, she was amazing, to be honest with you, because it was almost as if she was as curious as I was to what the problem was. So she was really there on the front line trying to figure it out with me, really like my partner in crime. Whether healthy or not, nature is sort of nature. And obviously trying to keep myself going, for my partner is really hard when I couldn't even keep myself going for me. And obviously, as it got worse, it's one of them really where I always see a healthy relationship is sort of when two individuals come together side by side, and then one has hardship and they can lean on the other, and then when they're fine, they can stand back up, and when someone else has hardships, they can lean on the other person, but they have to stand back up. Um, but it gets really hard when one person can't stand on their own at all, and that was essentially me, and it's a lot, I think, and it was a lot on her. And big, I do believe, relationship dynamics are a real thing. When I can't sort of be the masculine person I need to be for her, just to be clear, when I say like masculine, I just mean, being strong, firm, fair, open, empathetic, not a negative examples like, we could
Yeah.
say, but just to put that out there.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it was really hard, obviously, going through that with her. I couldn't show up for her. And bear in mind, we're both sort of at critical ages of our life where we want to move forward, we want to do things, experience things. To then me being pulled into this illness with no sign of when it could get recovered outside of the faith that we put on it. I think what really broke our relationship down was just that and I can't blame her, she just lost faith in really when would I get better. She was there for the full year through the worst of it, um, but it was just too much, really. I was having fits, for example, because my skin was so damaged. It was almost like the nerve endings were pringing, shall we say? So it was like, if I was itching, that reaction from my body, I'd be having fits, and that's just so hard on someone. She doesn't have to stay for that. She didn't sign up for that. We don't have a contract that says you're my carer. And we still talk now, and I'll always say
Yeah, I
to,
was going to ask that. I
yeah,
was going to
yeah.
say, are you still friends? Because, obviously, as a unit going through something like that, the two of you, you're just bound by this experience. And I would imagine if she was that pillar for you, it's great that you've kept in touch.
I wouldn't say we're the best of friends, but
Mm.
one thing I've always said to her is, you were there for me when I was at my worst, and you didn't have to be. So I've always said to her, listen, you'll always have a special place. So even though we're not together, I never want her to be in a bad position if I could help it.
So was it an amicable breakup?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think we were fully on the same page. I think we both learnt a lot through when we came to the breakup, realistically, because I think a lot of the expectations we had were very much, some of them were our own, but some of them
Mm.
were also external. So, what society would deem acceptable for a relationship, which, if I'm being quite honest, aren't acceptable with regards to you need to act this certain way. We got to the point where we were like, listen, we have two choices here. We either grow together or we let other people, society, dictate how our relationship needs to be. I need to find that strength in myself so that I could be the man I need to be for you. And like I said before, I think she did ultimately lose faith in when I would get better and how long she would have to go through this for. And I think in the end, we just sort of decided, you know what, like, love and grace, but I think we just maybe need to part ways.
And are you dating someone right now, Diren, if you don't mind me asking?
Not at the moment, no.
Has it been a case of, after you and your partner going, your ex going your separate ways, has it been a challenge?
Yes, yeah, definitely, definitely. I think there was a lot to unpack going through this TSW, a lot to
Mm-hmm.
unpack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have to admit, I'm in the best place I've ever been, and I think that was in part because of how much I had to confront within myself, and only myself. So that was only something I could do, and I spent a lot of time doing that. And that level of that harsh, honest, open transparency with myself, that accountability, it really transformed you, and transform me in terms of who I am now, in terms of how honest I am with myself, how honest I am with my relationships, with friends, even individuals I want to, hopefully progress with.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Have you been to therapy, if you don't mind me asking?
I have,
Because you strike me as someone that's obviously done a lot of introspection, and
yeah,
sometimes that doesn't come easy. Often, with the help of a therapist,
yeah.
individuals can find that a little bit. They can be coached into doing that a little bit
Yeah,
better.
funnily enough, I haven't. I mean, we could call YouTube my therapist, to be fair. I don't know. Only because of, like I say, my mom really was like my family. Obviously, my mom in particular was my biggest rock because she's a very spiritual. I wouldn't say religious per se, but she's a very spiritual person. And there's a bunch of names. Dr. Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Eckhart
Mm.
Tolle. A lot of these big figures that have very holistic mindsets that she sort of just said, have a little look. And obviously that led me to meditation, which then led me to, okay, let me ask some questions to myself. And then, asking those questions led me to, sitting down with myself, which then led into a whole journey inside that obviously reflects outside. So, no proper therapy. I guess I sort of gave myself therapy in a way, really.
Oh, well done, you. Not a lot of people have it in them to do that, but I can certainly echo the benefits of meditation. I've been trying to get into that practice, and I do try
Oh,
and do the headspace for
yes.
10 minutes before I get on with my day. But
Yeah.
there is something so good about asking yourself the questions, isn't it, Darren? Like challenging,
Yeah.
where are my thoughts coming from?
I think that was like the biggest like lesson for me was just we're not our thoughts and our thoughts aren't us. And
Mm-hmm.
I think some people they'll say, "Oh, I don't have a voice in my head," and it's like, well, you might just be so attached to that voice in your head you don't realize that you've got one. And it's like being able to just be conscious of that and steered by it is such a blessing. I'm really grateful to say this whole process of TSW has made me completely aware of my emotions, completely aware of my thoughts, to where I'm not now. I'm not going to say all the time because I do have moments,
I
but
think we all do.
yeah, yeah. But I'm not being led by them, which is really such a blessing. It's taken a lot of work. It's not easy, but
Mhm.
anyone I speak to, I'll just say, listen, invest the time because it's so worth it.
When it comes to your skin, did this affect your confidence with intimacy in a relationship?
That was a big part, actually. So obviously, yeah, being in a relationship, intimacy is a key part. It's a way in how we both express ourselves. And going through a condition where my entire face, my body was completely, it's debilitating. So, I was really unable to move and at some point unable to eat. So not being able to show that affection, um, to my partner, I couldn't hug, I couldn't kiss. And there were points when I couldn't kiss her for a period of like 4 months. And then obviously intimacy, we pretty much, I mean, that became non-existent for quite a 8 to 10 months, should we say, of a period. And having to put her through that, that's really hard because it's sort of not just that the skin condition was sort of affecting me, who I can be, who I cannot be, and who I need to be. It was affecting her because it's like, well, she's also going through a part of understanding what I'm going through. And in that, she's probably asking herself questions of, well, am I not good enough? Am I not worthy? Because she can't feel what I'm going through. And obviously, yes, it did look bad, but there might be times when I am smiling or having a good time, and it's hard for her to understand. Well, why can't he show me some of this or that? When in reality, for me, it was at that time just a facade for me to stay, to sort of just bring some level of positivity.
I can imagine, because like you say, intimacy is such an important part of a romantic relationship, and
Yeah.
to not be able to engage in that would certainly create almost like a disconnect between
Yes.
the two individuals. So no, thank you for sharing that. I mean, you seem to be at the other end of this, really traumatic experience that you've
Hmm.
been through. Have you had any sort of flare-ups since, or any skin-related conditions? Are you still going through it, or would you say you're out of it completely?
The spiritual side to me is saying, no, you should say you're through it, because you need to attach to that, you need to attach to that conviction to be who you want to be. But if I'm being transparent, I still do have moments. My skin definitely still has moments where it is still dry. If I have a shower, I will need to apply some serum after, for example, because it gets dry. We have quite heavy water where I am in the UK, and that does play a big part. And there's little elements of, let's say, if I was going to go swimming, for example, I'd have to consider chlorine, or maybe if I was going in a sauna or a steam room, I'd have to have a shower after and apply serum. So it does still affect me. I drink alcohol, so if I was going to drink, I maybe wouldn't drink for such long periods of time, because alcohol can dry your skin out, and that would catch up with me possibly.
Yeah. And are you watching what you eat as well? Because I know sometimes certain holistic healing methods include, thinking about what you're eating. You mentioned
Yeah,
alcohol, and that could be drying. Have you had to change your diet as well?
no. And you know what? I'm so grateful for that, because I mean, one thing I truly believe, and this pertains to obviously the diet question. I truly believe that obviously any physical manifestation has an inner emotional tie, personally, and I'm really lucky. I don't have any allergies to food, to be honest with you. I haven't really had to consider my diet through the entire process. I think outside of, let's say, within the TSW community, what they would normally say, like, oh, eat more protein because protein's good for the skin. Maybe try celery juice, which is like a strange thing within the TSW community of, oh, it could work. But outside of that, I really, you know what, even to this day, I eat what I want. I drink what I want, and I just take it as it comes.
Now, earlier, I know you mentioned your pillars of support in the form of your family and your partner at the time. I know that there are communities out there that can support. So, could I just ask, were there individuals that you reached out to, communities that you sort of joined to help you through this process?
So I think within TSW that there is an online community, and it's pretty much built up of Facebook groups, Instagram. Even I think even back when I was going through it, TikTok wasn't a thing, but TikTok is absolutely huge now, and there's a huge community on there. But for me, it was Instagram. I think it was my ex at the time shared some accounts on Instagram and was like, "Oh, look, they're going through what you're going through." Because I have to admit, me and social media, we don't see eye to eye. And I just stumbled into that. And then you end up sort of stepping into a world of the internet you didn't know existed, which was hundreds, if not thousands, hundreds of thousands of people going through TSW, documenting their journey on Instagram, having this community of people that all know each other. And that's what I'm really grateful that I was a part of and still am. And it was just really nice to find people. And it was like, oh, I feel that way. Oh, that's exactly what I'm going through. And it was like, wow. So I've just spent the last 6 months finding it so hard to have people to connect with, to now opening up to this world of people where it's like, yes, yes, and yes. We all just see eye to eye and everything, and know what it's like. And we're all up at silly hours in the morning because of the insomnia caused by this, where we can all talk and console each other. So it was like, wow, okay, it really is a great tool. Like if used with good discipline and the right way, it can be such a tool for good. It really can.
And it's interesting you mentioned that point, because just finding people that are going through or experiencing something similar to you just helps. Because I know
Uh,
earlier you mentioned as well that with people that aren't going through what you're going through, they may never understand. So I'm glad that you did find, individuals that were going through what you were going through. It helps
yeah,
validate your emotions as well.
that's exactly it. Yeah, that's it. I think you can't say better than that.
Just to sort of wrap up on this topic, I mean, if you were to come across somebody that was experiencing what you have experienced, or any skin related condition for that matter, what would you offer them as words of advice?
Oh, I'd say on TSW, avoid steroid creams. No, no. I think
Ban steroids.
yeah, steroids are bad. No, they have their place to be fair. But what I'll say is just listen with anything, even TSW, just find a holistic route to what's needed. You know, understand whatever external issue there could be an inner calling that's just not answered. Just listen to yourself. I found steroids even when I cut myself shaving. Okay, it did what it needed to do, but then when I was using the steroids to probably cover up insecurities in myself, was that right? I know now it's not. So I think individuals can be even more wiser to learn from some of those mistakes that I've made or other people have made to apply to their lives and say, well, listen, is this justified really, or is this maybe a limitation I'm putting on myself? So I just say really be aware of that. And I think the second thing for me, well, there's two things, which is I think one, just don't run away from yourself under any circumstance. So I've said it before, but look within. All the answers are pretty much there. And I think the third thing is, I know we just touched on it with the communities, but just find your tribe. So whatever you're going through, I think as humans, we're just super social. We are innately social beings. So, we know the internet can be a tricky place, but there are online communities. So just invest the time, see if you can find one, build those connections. Life can be hard, but we don't have to be victims. We don't have to choose to be a victim. We don't.
I love that. And you certainly don't strike me as a victim, So thank you so much for sharing that advice. Now, with all my guests, Diren, I ask one final question, and that is, what journey are you on now?
I've been asking that probably the last year, I think, ever since TSW, because it's opened a whole new light for me. What I'll say is that I think my journey ahead really isn't clear. It's not fully clear to me yet. But what I will say is I have started my own passion project with some friends of mine. We are committed to helping guys specifically, but all people. It is a YouTube project, but it's just basically about obviously what we can take away from everyday challenges, experiences, that wisdom. But I know for me, it really opened up my eyes in terms of helping people around the world. And though it's not clear to me how I'll do that, I just know it involves a level of traveling to other communities, understanding on a global level what people are struggling with, and hopefully these lessons I've learned, this wisdom that I'm grateful to have, I can impart and build communities, whether that's physically, schools, whatever, groups, but how that can translate to online as well. I just know that's some part of the big journey I want to walk.
That sounds like an incredible journey, and I will definitely link out your YouTube channel in the show notes for those that want to check it out. It sounds like an incredible thing. I think there's nothing better than the act of service for others, right?
Yes.
So fantastic journey that you are choosing to embark on next. So thank you once again, Diren, for joining me on my podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Journeys with Krutika. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and share. I'd love for you to hit the follow button wherever you get your podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you have a journey that you want to share, email me at journeyswithkrutika@gmail.com or reach out via my socials. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Just search Journeys with Krutika, because your journey is extraordinary.